Welcome to another edition of Mixing a Water Monday. Joining us today is former Gamecock offensive lineman and captain Mike Matulis. And Mike, perfect time to have you on to talk about the line, talk a little bit about the offense, and just talk about the Gamecocks doing something that has not been done.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's being able to get 4 wins in a row. It's just been an incredible stretch that we've seen for the last month plus now.
Well, first off, thanks for having me. And then awesome. I mean, first time we've beaten Texas A&M too since we started playing them, and what a way to do it. The offensive line, I'll jump straight into it. The offensive line has grown tremendously over the past couple of games. I mean, they look dominant up there too. I mean, it's showing with Marshawn Lloyd being able to run like he's run. I mean, first off, he's a phenomenal running back. I mean, he runs hard, but the offensive line is definitely doing some things different up front. And of course, there were some mistakes made last night. But overall, grading them, I think they did very well. And it's exciting to watch them grow and get better as the games go on.
Is there anything that stands out to you without knowing exactly what they're doing each play, knowing that it's zone blocking that just stands out to you, Mike, that maybe to the naked eye or to people that don't understand the offensive line position the way that you do, having played in the SEC, that you can kind of explain what you're seeing that could be a little bit different?
Getting movement, just when you look at the line of scrimmage, getting movement off that line of scrimmage, that's important. You can't have your guys getting pushed back into the play, blowing the play up. You need movement on that front. And right now when you watch them, they're doing well. They're aggressive. They're coming off the ball hard. And, even to the tight ends, they're blocking well. Coach Atkins' son made a hell of a block last night that led into a great running play. So the things are coming together. They're looking like a unit. They're playing well. And then the main thing that I'm noticing is just getting that line of scrimmage moved in the right direction.
Yeah, you mentioned before, too, with Marshawn Lloyd being able to get things going. I think there'd be a lot of people that were curious why they weren't running the ball maybe as much. I think at one point he had like 4 carries for 15 yards. He ended up finishing for 92 yards, 18 carries, 2 touchdowns. There's going to be people out there, and I understand, because from a rhythm standpoint, I feel like that's the biggest thing that makes this offense at times you wonder, okay, what's going on? And I can understand that. Obviously, when you play a team like Kentucky, who going into that game beforehand ranked top 20 in the country from a defensive standpoint, Texas A&M, even though they had their struggles and have had their struggles, I believe going into last night's game ranked 114th in the country in rush defense. You're not playing TikTok tech. You're playing big boy defenses now. So I say that because when you're watching the offense as a whole, I'm not asking you necessarily to say that you agree with everything or disagree with everything, but what are you seeing with them in terms of what they're doing differently now that is leading them to have more success in comparison to the first 3 weeks of the season?
Well, I think you kind of said it already, getting the ball to Marshawn Lloyd a lot more, but I think some of it's trial and error, right? You've got some new guys in there. You're figuring out how they play together. You're figuring out the systems, the play calling. I think sometimes we want things now. We want to start winning right off the bat, and it takes time for those things to develop into what we're seeing now, because that Texas A&M defense, they did look good last night. That D-line was a strong D-line, and it was a competitive game going back and forth.
And I'm sure, too, going into a game like that, having an extra week, never mind to be able to get healthy, it's a game plan, right? Everything that we said about South Carolina, you could say about A&M, because they were coming off a bye week, too.
Right.
When you know a team is going to run the football, and I know sometimes you could be getting in your head a little bit, right? Maybe the game plan was to throw early on in the game last night. I bring that up just because when you're going up against a team like that who has struggled against the run, but know that you want to run, how much challenging does that make it for an offensive line?
It's part of the game. You have to adjust and adapt, right? I mean, sometimes you go in there with one game plan and it doesn't work. So you have to be able to adjust and adapt to that. So, and I think they've done that well. And it helped with A&M's rushing defense, struggling a little bit and putting everything together, at the end of the day.
The other thing I want to bring up, too, because I think we're starting to see, in addition to the run game and how important it is, how off of that, we're seeing the play action, we're seeing the rollouts, we're seeing RPOs, we're starting to see Rattler get outside the pocket more. And yeah, look, there were times last night, of course, I'm sure that he would have liked throws back, but I feel like they're
Yeah.
trying to get him outside of
Mhm.
the pocket more because it really fits his style of play. I bring that up because earlier in the year, the first 2 games of the season, South Carolina allowed 9 sacks.
Mhm.
Now, granted, I know that sacks are an easy stat that sticks
Yeah.
out. It doesn't fully tell the whole story because as we found out last season, as much as people were hammering the offensive line, well, sometimes it's on the quarterback if he
Yeah.
doesn't identify the mic beforehand,
Mhm.
or like you mentioned before at the tight ends with Atkins, right? If a
Mhm.
tight end misses a block, if a running back misses a block, it's easy to blame the O-line. I say all that because over the last, even going to the Georgia game,
Mhm.
the offensive line play has been much better,
Yeah.
much better. But when you're dealing with a quarterback that's trying to get outside of the pocket, what is that like as an offensive lineman? Because it's not obviously as orthodox as, okay, just a drop back in the pocket passer. How do you develop that relationship? Because I think there's a lot of people that are still trying to figure out how Rattler's trying to develop that internal clock of knowing when to
Mhm.
step up in the pocket with this offensive line that he's working with and when to get outside of the pocket. But when you're dealing with a guy that does get out so much because they're designed to do that from a play standpoint, how does that work in terms of the dynamic between the quarterback and the offensive line?
Once again, you kind of have to adjust and adapt to it. You just kind of have to play to it and know it. But that's something that you feel as you play more and more together during practice and scrimmaging and things like that. But something that I think too, and it's a lot easier for me to say when I'm sitting on the couch coaching, and I don't have a big DN screaming off the end. But I think also Spencer needs to step into the pocket a little bit more. Sometimes I think he is run heavy, and so he looks to run out of the pocket. And there's a couple times where, I feel he could have stepped into the pocket a little bit more and let the play develop. But, like I said, it's a lot easier, in the stat that you had said before, 9 sacks. And, it's a lot easier for me to say sitting on the couch watching. But just something that I noticed, and I think that he could develop on a little bit more and would help the offensive line as well,
Let's talk about the defense because they definitely deserve a lot of credit.
Yeah.
And it was incredible. Obviously, setting the tone early with that interception after
Mhm.
having that 100-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. Just the defense going out there. What has that been like for you watching that? Because obviously, as an offensive lineman, you understand the ins and outs on both
Mhm.
sides. But what are you noticing them doing? Maybe the defensive line standpoint, because I know
Yeah.
you probably watched the game a little differently in
Mhm.
comparison to people who just watched the ball. Did you notice anything different from them last night?
Yeah, they look really good. I mean, it was and it was electric too. And one thing, the fans. I mean, just watching it, it was. I mean, you could tell it was loud. And all the 8 false starts or whatever they had, and so it was electric. And that helps the defense get hyped. But you could see that when you watch them play, you could see that they were getting after it. They were swarming the ball, which is something that I like seeing. When you just see the amount of red jerseys around the ball at the end of the play, that's a good sign, especially from your defense. And then they're getting hyped after it too.
Mhm.
So it was just helping carry that momentum throughout the game.
I don't know how much you paid attention specifically to Boogie Huntley last night. I mean, I mentioned this before that some of the stats it won't show. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he took on, sometimes it was 2 blockers
Yeah.
and it was freeing up other guys. Just the impact having a guy like that on the
Mm-hmm.
defensive line, what that can do. Um, when you're an offensive lineman and you see a big body like that, especially
Mm-hmm.
a guy that when he is healthy can make an impact. I mean, from an offensive standpoint, for you,
Mm-hmm.
that has to change things up a little bit, right?
It does. It does. And like you said, it frees up for other players to make plays. So, and people notice that. I mean, when you're watching that, you see, like you said, you see a double block on the guy, and it opens things up for other players. It's huge. It's a team player, and it's not, you know, it's something you need to keep going forward. It's tough because you want it as a player. You want those stats. You want everything kind of, it's like bring the crowd, bring the noise, and for you. But opening stuff up for other players is what makes that defense a whole.
And we have to talk about Xavier Legette's
Mm-hmm.
100-yard kickoff return. And I mentioned this after the game last night that I feel like it's a microcosm of this season because there were a lot of people early on in the year, once they were 1 and 2, they were ready to write them off
Mm-hmm.
or there's only going to be 5 wins this year, no bowl eligibility. Is Beamer the guy? And, for Leggett, obviously a couple weeks ago, he had a rough night against SC State. The 2 drops that led to interceptions, and then how he responds a couple weeks later, he has a huge kickoff return, which sets the tone. Just being able to watch a guy like that and just seeing how this team has responded in general, Mike, can you just sense an attitude that's just different with this team?
You can. In practice, sometimes it used to get like a stigma, being on special teams. You didn't really want to do it. But when you're watching our guys on special teams, they want to be there. They're out there to make plays. And special teams, you can win or lose a game based off of that. And, it's a huge testament to Coach Beamer, big special teams guy, especially when he was here. And the special teams looked really good. You can see they're out there to make plays.
And we joked about after the game. I mean, I joke, obviously it's not funny, but, as good as special teams was last night, I'm sure Pete Lembo is going to be more pissed off about the onside kick at the end of the game and trying to get that corrected. But, hey, that's coaching.
That was a good kick. I mean, that was just kind of the ball bounced perfectly on that one. That was also kudos to them. And kudos to Texas A&M. They played tough. They had a lot of injuries going on, and they played tough. It was, at the end of the day, it was a great game of football to watch last night. Very back and forth. It was a good game.
I say pissed, more so just okay, that'll be a point of emphasis to make sure that that's corrected so that they're not in a situation like that. Because like you said, I mean, that was as good of a kick as possible. But what can you do from a learning experience? Last thing I want to ask you, Mike, 4-game winning streak. It is crazy to think this after the start that they had, 1-2, that South Carolina at home next week has an opportunity to become bowl eligible before the end of October. Absolutely insane. The beauty about the Kentucky game was you had a week to be able to kind of decompress a little bit, get back to your equilibrium, and ignore all the outside noise. What advice would you tell this team right now as they get ready to play another game, go out on the line, but trying to block out that noise?
Play like they did tonight, just carry that momentum from this past game, this past weekend into next week. And, not to look too far ahead, but then, we've got Vandy after that, and then we've got Florida and then heading into Tennessee. So, I mean, it's exciting to watch this kind of, and as this momentum carries, first take care of Missouri, which I think we can do, especially if we play like we did last night and, let the momentum carry and, keep it running.
Well, it's been good to see South Carolina turn things around. It's good to be able to see football be played the way it was. It felt like almost like a decade ago. And I want to get too ahead of myself, but I know you were on those teams, and it's really exciting to see football in this city again. That didn't matter before, because obviously it always matters. Doesn't matter if, they could go 0-11, 0-12. We've seen that before, but just the fact that they've been able to turn things around as quickly as they have compared to where they were 23 months ago when they were 2-5 and didn't have a head coach. Impressive, to say the least. Mike, appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you. You have a good one.